around this?
It makes sense, Bruce. I mean, we have this kind of pervasive challenge with inventory in general, right? So we have lower inventory than there's demand for. And if you're a home builder building new construction, the resale inventory is technically your competitor in a lot of ways, right? So if there's a lot less of that, then things are looking pretty good for you, right? There's just a lot less homes in general to compete with as a builder. And we see that further in this story, Bruce. As a matter of fact, currently 1/3 of housing inventory is new construction compared to historical norms of a little more than 10%. So you go from new construction's normally about 10% and you have 90% competition versus now you're a third, 33% of all the homes available for sale. I have to imagine that on the heels of some of the lowest confidence we've seen in quite some time from builders last year is lending to some of this uptick. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, certainly it is for the builders. Anytime confidence is building in our industry in any particular area, I think it's a slight win.
Right. This was a quote from the company in their March report. And they said, "We anticipate that our existing balances of cash and cash equivalents and future expected cash flows generated from our operations will be sufficient to satisfy our operating requirements for at least the next 12 months.
Here's what I hear, Bruce, when I hear you read that. Thank you, by the way, is we have just enough cash to satisfy 12 months of burn rate before we're out again. And by the way, again, in a market with a lot of headwind, it's optimistic to say the least. And I think, to be fair, Bruce, their goal in the long run, Fathom, is to kind of build an end-to-end real estate services platform, right? And we've talked at length about what end-to-end is on this podcast and the different players that are seeking to create that end-to-end. And I think fairly so. Here's the challenge. It does take a long time. It does take a lot of money. And so if you're pursuing that from a position of not being profitable, there's a much higher risk than pursuing that long run goal of end to end while being profitable. Those are two very different pathways for potentially getting there, right? Hence, we see this need to borrow additional capital to continue down that pathway. It's certainly a bold move with a lot of risk.
In other words, due to the language used in HomeServices listing agreements, every homeowner who sold their home through the brokerage between March 6th of 2015 and December 31st of 2020 is entitled to independently arbitrate their own case. So what we do know, Chase, is there are a lot of different listing agreements out there, right? So I think it's fascinating that the plaintiffs are thinking, oh, we're just going to wrap everybody up into one big bundle and go after the deep pockets and look for the cash.
Well, that's exactly what's happening, Bruce, because again, we know, and anyone listening to this podcast likely knows, that all of the decision-making and negotiating is done at the kitchen table between individual agent and individual home seller. It's not the Keller Williams, the HomeServices, the National Association of Realtors that is having any of those face-to-face, belly-to-belly conversations with the home seller. However, those are the companies and organizations thought of as having the deep pockets, and the class action status is thought of as the best and easiest way to get to the pockets, right? So it is definitely a big story in our industry, and we'll have to continue to monitor it regardless of how we feel about it.
Yeah, you and I aren't attorneys, and we unfortunately won't get to decide this particular.